I was 7 when the city promised magic, but all we found were closed doors and frozen smiles. To finally get a home, my father taught me we had to become someone else entirely. I was 7 when we moved to the city. To me, it was the grandest adventure of my life. I remember pressing my face against the cool glass of our old sedan, watching the green fields and sleepy little towns of our past blur into a long, forgettable smear. Ahead of us, the horizon began to glitter. It wasn't the stars. It was something man-made, something that promised everything. My dad called it the Emerald City, and in my mind, it was a place of magic, where the buildings were so tall they tickled the clouds, and every street corner held a new wonder. Dad had gotten a big promotion. Chief engineer, he'd say, puffing out his chest. The words sounded important, heavy with meaning I didn't fully grasp. All I knew was that it made my mom smile. A real, genuine smile that reached her eyes. She'd been worried about the move. "It's a different world, Michael," I'd heard her whisper to my dad late one night when they thought I was asleep. "People there, they're not like us." Dad had just hugged her and said, "It's 1988, Sarah. It's a new world everywhere. This is our chance. This is for Leo." For the first week, we lived in a cramped, stuffy motel room that smelled of stale cigarettes and cleaning chemicals. But I didn't care. Every day was an expedition. Dad would take the phone book, a book so thick it felt like a brick-and-circle apartment listings with a red pen. He'd make calls from the payphone in the lobby, his voice booming with a confidence that could move mountains. "Yes, a 2-bedroom would be perfect," he'd say, winking at me. "My wife, my son, and I. We're ready to move in as soon as possible." The first apartment we saw was on the 15th floor. From the window, the city's yellow taxicabs looked like little toy cars. I could see everything. The landlord was a man named Mr. Davies. On the phone, he had been incredibly cheerful, telling my dad the place was a real gem, and that he was lucky it was still available. But when we arrived, his smile seemed stuck on. It didn't quite fit his face. He kept glancing from my dad's dark skin to my mom's, then down to me. He showed us the apartment quickly, his words clipped. "The pipes are old," he'd say, pointing at a pristine sink. "And the neighbors? They can be loud." When my dad, still smiling, said, "It's wonderful, we'll take it," Mr. Davies suddenly looked pained. "Oh," he said, clearing his throat. "I'm so sorry. I just remembered. A couple put a deposit down this morning. My wife forgot to tell me. It's gone." My dad's smile faltered just for a second, but he recovered, shook the man's hand, and led us out. The second apartment was a garden-level unit with a little patch of grass out back. "You could have a little garden, Sarah," Dad said, his eyes bright with hope again. The landlady, a woman with hair sprayed into a perfect silver helmet, had the same frozen smile as Mr. Davies. She spoke to my dad, but her eyes were always looking just past his shoulder, as if she were talking to someone standing behind him. After the tour, as my dad pulled out his checkbook, she held up a perfectly manicured hand. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake," she said, her voice like cracking ice. "We have a very strict no-children policy. The online listing must have been incorrect." I looked down at my shoes. I felt like I had done something wrong, just by being there. It went on like this for 2 weeks. On the phone, my dad was a promising candidate, a chief engineer with a stable job. In person, the apartments were always just rented, or had sudden plumbing issues, or the landlord had to check with the building owner about a new policy. Each rejection chipped away at my father. His booming voice grew quieter on the phone. The confident set of his shoulders started to slump. My parents started having hushed, tense conversations after I went to bed. I'd press my ear to the thin motel room door, hearing words like "unfair," "what do we do?" and "maybe this was a mistake." Then we found the one. It was perfect. A 3-story brownstone on a street lined with trees. The landlord was a friendly older man named Mr. Henderson. He didn't have a frozen smile. His was real. He laughed at my dad's jokes. He told my mom the kitchen had great natural light for her plants. He even knelt down and looked me right in the eye. "And what do you think of this room, young man?" he asked, showing me a bedroom with a big window overlooking the street. Big enough for all your toys?" I nodded enthusiastically. He smelled like cinnamon and old books. He felt safe. Downstairs in his office, he handed my dad the application. "Just a formality," he said with a warm chuckle. "Honestly, I can tell you're good people. It's a gut feeling." My dad filled out the paperwork, his hand moving with a renewed confidence. I saw his big, proud signature at the bottom. My mom was practically glowing. This was it. This was our home. Dad slid the paper across the heavy wooden desk. Mr. Henderson picked it up. He scanned the top, his smile still in place. He read my dad's name, Michael Bell. He read my mom's, Sarah Bell. He read my name, Leo Bell. His eyes stopped on the section for previous address. He traced the line with his finger. His smile didn't vanish. It froze. It cracked. It turned into something else, something I'd seen on the faces of all the others. The warmth in the room vanished, sucked out like air from a vacuum. He looked up, not at my dad, but at my mom. His gaze was cold, analytical. Then his eyes flickered down to me. He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. "I see," he said, his voice flat and unfamiliar. "Everything seems to be in order. I need to make a quick call. To the building's owner. There are certain neighborhood covenants we have to uphold." My dad's hand, the one not holding the application, rested on my mom's shoulder. I watched his fingers tighten ever so slightly on the fabric of her blouse. My mom, in turn, put her hand on my knee. I could feel a faint tremor in her touch. The air in the cozy, cinnamon-scented office had turned sharp and cold. Mr. Henderson didn't look at us. He swiveled his chair to face the wall and picked up the heavy black receiver of his telephone. The clicking of the rotary dial sounded like tiny bones snapping in the silence. "Hello, George. Henderson here," he said into the phone. His voice was different now. It was lower, more conspiratorial. "Yes, fine. Listen, I have that lovely family here for 3B. The Bells. Yes, the chief engineer." He paused, listening. I saw him glance at the application on his desk. "That's right. They're wonderful people. Very presentable." There was another long pause. My dad's posture was ramrod straight, his face a mask of stone. "Well, that's the thing, George. The previous address is Barton Creek." He said the name of our old town like it was a dirty word. I didn't understand. Barton Creek was home. It was tire swings and cookouts and the fireflies we'd catch in mason jars on summer nights. Why did he say it like that? "Yes," Mr. Henderson continued, his voice barely a whisper now. "That's what I thought. No, of course, I understand completely. The integrity of the block. Of course, I'll let them know." He hung up the phone without saying goodbye. The click of the receiver settling into its cradle echoed in the room. He swiveled back around, and the fake, pained smile was back, stapled to his face. "Folks, I am so terribly sorry," he began, looking at a spot on the wall just above my dad's head. "It seems the owner has other plans for the unit. Some last-minute renovations. He should have told me. It's a complete mix-up on our end. My deepest apologies for wasting your time." My dad stood up. He didn't say a word. He just nodded once, a quick, sharp movement of his head. He took my mom's hand and led her to the door. I scrambled after them, and as I passed the desk, I looked back at Mr. Henderson. For a split second, his eyes met mine. There was no apology in them. There was nothing. It was like looking at the blank windows of an empty house. The silence in the car on the way back to the motel was heavier than any sound I had ever heard. My mom stared out the window, her face pale. My dad gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. The city lights, which had seemed so magical just a few hours ago, now felt cold and mocking. I felt a knot of confusion and sadness in my stomach. I kept replaying it in my head. What was wrong with Barton Creek? What was wrong with our name? What was wrong with us? Back in the motel room, the cheerfulness we had left with was gone for good. My dad paced the small space between the two beds while my mom sat on the edge of one, staring at her hands. "They hear my voice on the phone, Sarah," my dad said, his own voice raw with a frustration that was close to breaking. "They hear chief engineer, they see my credit report, and they're ready to hand me the keys. But then they see Us, or they see where we're from. He stopped pacing and slammed his fist softly on the cheap particle board dresser. Barton Creek. That's the code, isn't it? It's the polite way of saying it. Michael, don't, my mom whispered. Don't what? Don't see what's right in front of my face? He ran a hand over his head, his shoulders finally slumping in defeat. I thought it would be different here. I really did. I lay on my bed, pretending to be asleep, the worn motel blanket pulled up to my chin. I was listening to every word, trying to build a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. A chief engineer was a good thing. A family was a good thing. Barton Creek was a good thing. But when you put them all together in this new city, they somehow became a bad thing. My dad was quiet for a long time. I could hear the hum of the ice machine down the hall and the distant wail of a siren. Then he spoke again. His voice changed. The defeat was gone, replaced by a steely edge. It was his engineer's voice, the one he used when he was looking at a problem from all angles, trying to find the one weak point he could exploit. It's the presentation, he said slowly. The initial variable, that's what's wrong with the equation. He walked over to the phone by the bed. I'm calling Marcus. Uncle Marcus was my mom's younger brother. He'd lived in the city for 10 years. He sounded nothing like us. His voice was fast and sharp, and he laughed a lot. He didn't have the slow southern drawl that my parents had. When Dad got him on the phone, he explained the situation in short, clipped sentences. No emotion, just facts. A list of rejections. The coded language. The final no from Mr. Henderson. I heard my uncle's voice, a tinny squawk through the receiver. It was angry. My dad listened for a minute, then said, No, man, that's not the plan. I have a different idea. I need a proxy. I need a voice. The next day, my dad spent hours with the newspaper's classified section, circling new apartment listings. He found one that sounded even better than the brownstone. 3 bedrooms, top floor, renovated kitchen, great school district, he read aloud. He didn't pick up the phone. Instead, he handed the paper to my mom and walked out. He came back an hour later with my Uncle Marcus. Uncle Marcus hugged my mom and swung me up into the air, making me giggle for the first time in days. He looked at my dad and nodded. You ready to run the experiment, Mike? He asked. Dad took a deep breath. Let's do it. We all gathered around the little motel room table. Uncle Marcus took the newspaper. He looked at the listing my dad had chosen. He picked up the phone receiver and winked at me. Then he dialed the number. His whole demeanor changed. His voice became smoother, a little deeper. Yes, hello, he said, his tone casual and confident. I'm calling about the apartment for rent on Elm Street. Is it still available? He listened, then chuckled. Fantastic. The name's Jones. Marcus Jones. He listened again, and a huge grin spread across his face. He looked at my dad, his eyes wide with a mixture of triumph and anger. He held the receiver slightly away from his ear, so we could hear the man on the other end. The voice was booming and friendly. Jones. Perfect. I was just telling my wife I had a good feeling about you when you called yesterday. So, when can you and the family stop by to see it? My father's face went pale. He had never called that number before. The friendly voice on the phone continued, oblivious to the silent shockwave that had just ripped through our motel room. I've got an opening at 4 this afternoon, if that works for you, Mr. Jones. Uncle Marcus, his eyes still locked on my dad's, recovered instantly. 4 sounds perfect, he said, his voice as smooth as ever. My wife and I will be there. He got the address, thanked the man, and hung up. The room was deathly quiet. My mom was staring at the phone as if it were a snake. My dad just stood there, his face unreadable. He had spent weeks calling numbers from the paper, being told everything was taken, only to have my uncle get a warm invitation on his first try, for a call my dad hadn't even made. Mike, my uncle said softly, the playful grin gone from his face. What was the name you gave them when you called? I never called, my dad whispered, his voice hoarse. I've never called that number in my life. Then who did? My mom asked, her hand flying to her mouth. The puzzle pieces in my 7-year-old brain clicked together with a sickening crunch. The different voices. The names. Barton Creek. The presentation, my dad had called it. I looked from my dark-skinned father to my equally dark-skinned mother, then at my uncle, who was much lighter. He could have been my mother's cousin, maybe, but not her brother. Not at first glance. And his voice, it sounded like the voices on the television. It sounded like the landlords who were so friendly on the phone before they saw us. My dad slumped into one of the motel chairs, the classified section crinkling under his elbow. "It's the name," he said, staring at the wall. "Bell." And my voice. "It's not just when they see us, Sarah. It's before. They can hear it." He looked at Marcus. "Did you call about any other apartments yesterday?" Uncle Marcus shook his head. "No, just the one you pointed out today." That was the first and only call. A dark realization settled over the room. Someone else named Jones had called yesterday. A Mr. Jones with the right kind of voice. And the landlord had confused my uncle for him. We had stumbled, completely by accident, into someone else's appointment. We had slipped through the first line of defense. "So what do we do?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "We can't go." "Yes, we can," Dad said, a new hard light in his eyes. He stood up, the chair scraping against the linoleum. "No, you two are going." He pointed at my mom and my uncle. "You and Marcus are Mr. and Mrs. Jones." My mom looked horrified. "Michael, no, we can't lie like that. And what about Leo?" "Leo and I will wait in the car around the corner," Dad said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "We'll be the friends helping you move. We'll show up later, once the lease is signed, once it's too late for them to back out. We're going to run this experiment all the way to the end." Uncle Marcus looked at my dad, a slow, sad smile touching his lips. "You know this is crazy, right, Mike?" "Is it crazier than being homeless in a city where I'm the chief engineer for the biggest construction firm downtown?" Dad shot back. "We just need a foot in the door. A real door. Once we're in, we'll be the best damn neighbors they've ever had. We just have to get in." And so, the plan was set. At 3:30, my mom, looking nervous and beautiful in her Sunday dress, got into the front seat of Uncle Marcus's newer, nicer car. My uncle, in a crisp shirt, looked like he owned the whole city. They looked like the couple from the catalogs that came in the mail. They looked like Mr. and Mrs. Jones. My dad and I followed in our old sedan. He parked it a block away from the address, on a street with big, shady oak trees that formed a canopy overhead. From our spot, we had a perfect view of the entrance to a beautiful, clean-looking brick apartment building. "Okay, champ," Dad said, turning to me in the back seat. "We're on a stakeout, like in the detective shows. We just have to sit here and be quiet until Mom and Uncle Marcus give us the signal." I pressed my face against the glass again, but this time I wasn't looking at the city with wonder. I was a spy. We watched them get out of the car. My uncle put a confident hand on the small of my mom's back and guided her toward the building. A man in a bright yellow shirt came out to greet them. It was the landlord, I guessed. His voice had sounded so friendly on the phone. From a distance, he looked friendly too. He was beaming, shaking my uncle's hand with both of his, then shaking my mom's. He clapped my uncle on the shoulder like they were old friends and led them inside. The wait was agonizing. My dad didn't turn on the radio. We just sat there listening to the sound of our own breathing and the distant city traffic. I counted red cars. I counted people walking dogs. I traced the cracks in the dashboard with my finger. 20 minutes felt like an hour. "Why couldn't you go, Dad?" I finally asked, my voice small. He looked at me in the rearview mirror. His eyes were tired. "Because sometimes, Leo," he said slowly, "the world decides what it thinks of you before you even say a word. Today we're just trying to be a little bit smarter than the world." Just then, my uncle's car's headlights flashed twice. The signal. My dad took a deep breath. "Okay, that's it. They got it." A wave of relief washed over his face, so powerful it was like watching the sun come out from behind a cloud. He started the car, a real smile, the first I'd seen in days, spreading across his lips. "We have a home, son. We have a home." He pulled out from our parking spot and drove slowly down the block. As we approached the beautiful brick building, my mom and Uncle Marcus walked out, following the beaming landlord. They were all smiling. The landlord was holding a set of keys, dangling them from his finger. He handed them to my uncle. It worked. The crazy plan had actually worked. My dad pulled our old, slightly rusty sedan up to the curb right behind my uncle's car. He got out, his smile wide and proud. "Honey, Marcus," he called out. "Looks like you sealed the deal." The landlord turned. He saw my dad get out of the driver's side of our old car. He saw his dark skin, his broad smile. The landlord's own smile faltered. His eyes darted from my dad to my uncle, then to my mom, his face a canvas of dawning confusion. He looked at my dad, then back at my uncle's light skin, then back at my dad's dark skin. The friendly expression on his face collapsed, like a building being demolished. "Who?" he said, his voice suddenly hard and suspicious as he pointed a trembling finger at my father. "The hell are you?" The landlord's question hung in the air, sharp and ugly. The friendly afternoon suddenly felt cold. My mom froze, her hand still holding the freshly signed lease agreement, the paper crinkling in her grip. Uncle Marcus stepped slightly in front of her, his body language shifting from relaxed to protective. My dad, however, didn't flinch. His proud smile never wavered. He walked calmly toward the group, his hand outstretched. "Michael Bell," he said, his voice deep and steady, the same voice I'd heard him use with important clients at his old job. "I'm Sarah's husband. We can't thank you enough for helping us out, Marcus. Bringing the deposit over and co-signing. My credit's a little tied up with the move, you know how it is." He was rewriting the story right there on the sidewalk. He wasn't the applicant, he was just the husband, the friend, the tag-along. It was brilliant. I saw the landlord, a man whose name we later learned was Mr. Gable, struggling to process this new information. His mind was racing, trying to find the loophole, the escape clause. He looked at the signed lease in my mother's hand, then at my dad, then back at the lease. He had just handed the keys to my uncle, the co-signer. He had a legally binding contract with Mrs. Sarah Jones, or, as she would be known, Mrs. Sarah Bell. Mr. Gable's face went through a rapid series of emotions. Confusion, then anger, then a sort of pinched resignation. He knew he'd been outmaneuvered. He snatched his hand back before my dad could shake it. "The lease is for 2 occupants, he said, his voice tight. "Mr. and Mrs. Jones." "That's right," Uncle Marcus said smoothly, not missing a beat. "And my sister, Sarah, is Mrs. Jones for all intents and purposes. She's recently separated. I'm just helping her get on her feet." He gestured toward me, still sitting in the back of our car. "Her and her boy." The lie was getting bigger, more complex, but it was woven so seamlessly that Mr. Gable was trapped. He couldn't accuse them of lying without admitting his own prejudice. He couldn't say, "I wouldn't have rented to you if I knew he was your husband," because that was illegal. He was caught. His face turned a blotchy red. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stalked back into the building, the glass door whispering shut behind him. We didn't cheer. We didn't celebrate. The victory felt hollow, tainted by the fight it took to win it. Uncle Marcus handed the keys to my dad. Their eyes met, and in that look, a whole conversation passed between them, of gratitude, of sadness, of the bitter reality of the world we were living in. "Get your things," Uncle Marcus said quietly. "I'll help you unload." Moving in was a strange affair. We did it quickly, quietly, as if we were afraid Mr. Gable would find a reason to throw us out before we'd even unpacked. Some of the neighbors peeked through their blinds as we carried in boxes and furniture. Their faces were curious, unreadable. I felt like an exhibit in a museum, a strange new creature brought into their habitat. But once the door to our new apartment was closed, it was ours. It was on the top floor, just like the ad said. Sunlight streamed through the big windows, making dust motes dance in the air. It smelled like fresh paint and new carpets. My room was huge, with a big closet that I immediately decided was a perfect secret fort. For the first time in weeks, I saw my mom's shoulders relax. She walked into the kitchen, ran her hand over the clean countertops, and let out a long, shaky breath. "It's beautiful, Michael," she whispered. My dad came and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I told you, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I told you I'd find us a home." Life in that apartment wasn't always easy. Mr. Gable never spoke to us again. If we passed him in the hall, he would stare fixedly at the wall until we were gone. Some neighbors were cold, pulling their children a little closer when we were at the mailboxes, but others were kind. An elderly woman from downstairs, Mrs. Gable's own mother, who lived with them, brought us a freshly baked apple pie the second day. She knocked on our door, smiled a genuine, crinkly-eyed smile at me, and told my mum, "Don't you mind my son-in-law? He's got a heart 2 sizes too small. A family across the hall with kids my age invited me over to play. Slowly, tentatively, we began to weave ourselves into the fabric of the building. We were the best damn neighbors they ever had, just like my dad said we would be. He fixed a rattling pipe in the laundry room that Mr. Gable had ignored for months. My mom's plants filled our balcony with color, and she always shared her extra tomatoes and herbs. I made friends. I learned the city's rhythms, the rumble of the subway, the specific chime of the ice cream truck. That apartment became our sanctuary, our fortress, our home. I never forgot what I saw that summer. I never forgot the frozen smiles, the hushed phone calls, the sudden unavailability of places that were open just moments before. I learned that racism wasn't always loud and angry like on the news. Sometimes it was quiet. It was a polite refusal, a coded word, a door silently closed. It was the color of a voice on the telephone. But I also learned something else. I learned about courage. I saw it in my father's unyielding determination, in my mother's quiet strength, and in my uncle's willingness to stand with us. They taught me that sometimes to beat a rigged game, you have to be smarter than the people who wrote the rules. They taught me that a home isn't just a place you're given. Sometimes it's a place you have to fight for, with every ounce of wit and dignity you have. And standing in the sunlight of our new living room, I knew, without a doubt, that we had won.